To the Republican strategist and former official at the Department of Homeland Security, James Norton. Good evening to you. Welcome. The word chaos has come up quite a bit in regards to the comings and goings in the White House in the last few days. Apt description?
You know, I think that serving at the pleasure of the president really takes on a new definition in the Trump presidency, and the fact that, you know, no longer you're going to have these appointments that, you know, maybe people can ride out a 2 or 4 year appointment that, you know, the president clearly is dissatisfied, and he's almost taken a flamethrower, if you will, to the White House and moved out a lot of staff and very quickly moved in people like Anthony Scaramucci, and now, you know, General Kelly is going to take this appointment. And so, you know, I think it's not that unsurprising reshuffling of his White House, given the fact that it's been really hard for the Trump administration to really accomplish anything at this point. You know, they did get judged.
Unsurprising, you say? The reshuffling is not unsurprising, even though this is the 8th person to go in 6 months?
Well, I think that some of those folks that left weren't necessarily Trump appointees. You know, Sally Yates and James Comey weren't necessarily part of the original Trump administration. So I think from the standpoint of the original folks that came in with him, you know, he's quickly moving on with them and bringing in, you know, a different type of staff, you know, especially with General Kelly, who has been, you know, has a military background and, you know, really hasn't been since Al Haig, who served President Nixon back in the late 70s, who came on after H.R. Haldeman left. And so I think that you're going to see a much different approach. I think, you know, the fact that North Korea just fired off, you know, some missiles yesterday, and, you know, the threats overseas are great. And I think somebody having like General Kelly in that position, given the foreign policy concerns around the world, is probably a good thing for President Trump at this point.
But do you think General John Kelly will survive long enough to make a difference?
Well, I think some of his early challenges certainly will be, you know, how can he mesh with the current staff in the White House, and I think that'll be one of his early challenges. And so I think that, you know, we'll very quickly learn, depending on, you know, what happens here in September and October, how successful General Kelly will be in the early stages, as well as, you know, will he bring on, you know, other staff or do a reshuffling on his own. Some of the folks that will fall under him specifically in the National Security Council, Homeland Security Council, and some of the other domestic policy areas. One thing I would say about General Kelly is that he does have a lot of bipartisan relationships, you know, on Capitol Hill, and was praised by many Democrats when he was first appointed to the position of DHS Secretary. So I think from the standpoint of the Trump White House needing a lot more friends on Capitol Hill, given the failure of the healthcare issues, you know, I think that would be also another chance for him to be successful, or show President Trump that he can be helpful to the administration.
Honestly, how are the American public reading all of this? Have they lost confidence in the president?
You know, I think it's hard to say they've lost confidence at this point. I think if you look at the most recent special elections, you know, they went Republican despite Democrats coming out very strongly trying to win some of those seats. I think going in, voters know that, you know, President Trump, it was going to be a very different president than we've seen in the past, given his private sector background, and also given his, you know, personality that I think many are familiar with. So I don't think it's necessarily, you know, a shock that there's been a lot of change. I think there is a little bit of disappointment when it comes to accomplishments and his ability to negotiate with Democrats and get things done. So I think that is something that's probably on his mind in terms of trying to reset the deck and try to get things done here. I know we were already talking about tax reform this weekend and infrastructure going into September. So I think it's going to be really critical for him to have some accomplishments in those areas. And I think that may, you know, reset the deck for him in terms of getting away from some of the early missteps that the administration's had.
Okay, James Norton, thank you very much, Republican strategist there.